Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the White House. We're really honored to have you all here today as we launch the 2024 National Strategy for Suicide Prevention and Federal Action Plan. I want to thank all of you who've worked so hard to make this possible. It takes a lot of work to do this, so thanks again. I want to especially acknowledge those today who experienced the devastating impact of suicide firsthand. Whether it is losing a loved one or experiencing suicidal thoughts and actions themselves. And a special thank you to Ashley, Allo, Shelby. We're so grateful to have you here today to share your stories. This is a tough topic. It's tough to talk about it. There's a lot of stigma involved, and there shouldn't be. And that's something the Surgeon General and I talk about all the time, is it's okay to talk about this, as tough as this topic is. So that's why it's good that we're all here today together, because it's important that we do this, because as we all know, suicide affects everyone. It doesn't matter your age, race, gender, or where you live. It impacts all of us. And sadly, suicidal thoughts and actions have really increased over the past several years. The stats, you know them, they're horrific. 132 people die by suicide each and every day. And this number is simply unacceptable. But we're here today because we know that we can and will change this. Suicide is preventable. And the President and Vice President and the entire administration have been hard at work taking action to mitigate and prevent suicide. My wife, the Vice President, often says that mental health care is also health care. It's also health care, and we've got to think of it that way. And that's why this national strategy that you've worked so hard on is so important. Every single action that we can do will save more lives. And with today's release, which includes a lot of things, I'll highlight a few of them. We can have more support to mobile crisis response teams. And this is especially important for our rural communities. More youth suicide prevention activities through programs like 4-H. Better data partnerships across the federal government. New resources for suicide prevention on our railways. New action guides and implementation tools for suicide prevention in schools. New campaign materials to promote diverse perspectives and include those with lived experience. New toolkits for working with groups at high risk, like Native communities, farmers and ranchers, and of course our young people. With this plan and its call to action to care, connect, and collaborate, we commit to creating a world where no one has to experience the devastating impacts of suicide ever again. Before I hand it over to my colleague, Mayor Steve Benjamin, I'd like to read the dedication from the strategy. To those we have lost to suicide, to those who struggle with thoughts of suicide, to those who have made a suicide attempt, to those caring for someone who struggles with thoughts of suicide, to those left behind after a death by suicide, to those in recovery, and to all of those who work tirelessly to prevent suicide and suicide attempts in our nation every day. We believe that we can and we will make a difference. And that is exactly why we're here today, to make a difference. So thank you all for coming together, for being open to reducing the stigma that should not exist around this topic, so we can prevent suicides together. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my good friend, Mayor Steve Benjamin, who is the director of the White House Office of Public Engagement. Mayor Benjamin.
I would say he's the hardest working second gentleman in history, but you may also be the only second gentleman in history. And I will tell you, he has been a gift to the American people as he leads all across the country with clarity and vigor. I'm so thankful to follow second gentleman Emhoff. I am Steve Benjamin. I have the privilege for the last year of serving as one of the president's senior advisors and assistants, and I run the Office of Public Engagement at the White House. Many of you have probably worked with the office in the past, and this may be the first opportunity, and prayerfully not the last opportunity, to work with several of you. Public engagement represents and engages with what I love to call the fifth estate. You have the three estates of government, the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. You have the fourth estate, free media and a mature democracy. And then you have the fifth estate, civil society. Those of you who are out there doing the work every single day, making these macro policies real in the lives of people every single day. It's our job to do, as my grandmother would tell me, and as the president told me when he told me I was taking this job. He didn't offer me a job. Some of you may have been voluntold in the past as well. But he told me that God gives you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You're supposed to listen twice as much as you talk. And our office has the wonderful privilege across 30 portfolios to engage with the public every single day in so many different ways. And it's amazing that when you actually listen, what you can hear. You can hear people's hopes and dreams, their pains, their suffering, and then you can work together to find common solutions to help people, to help preserve human life. And that's what we're doing here today, and we're so thankful. It's some of the statistics that Doug just went over are painful and real, but they're statistics. But the opportunity to turn that data into humanized data, into stories that help inform the body politic and help us, again, work together to change things going forward is so important. This office has the opportunity, I believe, to represent what we call it, the sacred trust between the president and vice president, the people that they serve. So I hope and pray if this is your first engagement with us, it's not your last. We need you. We need your constructive input. We need your constructive criticism as to how we can all do things better, because we all know that when we work together, we can do some amazing things. I can only imagine the journey that brought many of you to this room at this time. And I hope and pray that you recognize the significance of what you're doing here today. Today we're making history. We're honoring lives lost. We're saving lives. And together, there's no limit to what we can do. So I love to say the two most powerful words in the English language are thank you. My wife tells me they're actually yes, ma'am. I still think they're thank you. And I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for leading. I hope and pray that you recognize your point in history and what it means to so many people who you don't know right now. They need your voice. They need the power of celebrity, elevating voices across this country and across the globe. And just want to say thank you to each and every one of you. God bless you.
Thank you all. I'm Mira Tandon. I'm the chair of the Domestic Policy Council, and I'm the president's domestic policy advisor. And I'm really sorry I can't be with you there in person today. I want to say a heartfelt thank you to the second gentleman for his really moving words that ground us in the importance of today's conversation. And I want to say thank you to everyone there and those listening at home. As the second gentleman said, and as Steve said, this is a really difficult but critically important issue. And I'm proud of the administration tackling it head on. As you all know, improving the health and well-being of the American people is extremely important to the president, and that includes doing everything we can to reduce suffering and prevent suicide. We have launched several efforts to tackle our mental health crisis and to beat the overdose epidemic. And today we are proud to launch a new national strategy for suicide prevention and a federal action plan. The second gentleman went through some of these statistics, but I will state some of them as well. As a nation, we are currently seeing an unprecedented level of suicide deaths. In 2022 alone, nearly 50,000 lives were lost to suicide. That is one suicide death every 11 minutes. On top of these tragic numbers, we know that in 2022, 13.2 million people reported seriously considering suicide, and 1.6 million reported a suicide attempt. Even more concerning is that overall suicide rates increased more than 36% between 2000 and 2022. Suicide levels are disproportionately higher among historically underserved populations. Between 2018 and 2021, suicide rates rapidly increased among Black, Hispanic, and American Indians and Alaska Native populations. This is simply unacceptable. Behind each of these figures are individuals we've lost, families and communities torn apart by these tragedies. We can and must do more. Suicide is a complex problem with no single cause and no single solution. But as the second gentleman said, it is preventable. Given the multiple factors that may lead to suicide, preventing suicide requires a comprehensive public health approach, one that harnesses the full breadth of the federal government in partnership with communities and stakeholders. The strategy we're announcing today builds on the administration's track record of taking meaningful steps to prevent suicide. We know that ensuring timely access to crisis intervention saves lives. And in July 2022, the administration successfully transitioned to the new suicide and crisis hotline 988, which makes it easier for individuals in crisis to access life-saving counseling. We have already invested over $1 billion to build the infrastructure and help states train counselors. We've also made specialized 988 services available to LGBTQ teens, Spanish speakers, and deaf and hard of hearing populations. And this investment is paying off. Since the July 2022 launch, 988 has fielded about 9.1 million calls, texts, and chats. This hotline is truly saving lives. We know that nearly all 988 calls are resolved over the phone, but when people do need more support, we are improving how we ensure rapid response from trained mental health providers. Thanks to funding from the American Rescue Plan, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services awarded planning grants to states to provide community-based mobile crisis intervention services. To date, CMS has approved 18 states and the District of Columbia to provide these services permanently through Medicaid. Furthermore, to address the rise in suicide among youth, SAMHSA, also known as the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, has awarded millions in suicide prevention grants to support local communities. This work is really vital, and these programs take place in schools, college, juvenile justice systems, substance use and mental health programs, foster care systems, and other youth service organizations. We are also doing more to tackle veteran suicide. Last year, the Department of Veterans Affairs launched a program to allow veterans in acute suicidal crisis to go to any VA or non-VA healthcare facility for emergency health care. To date, more than 50,000 veterans have used this program. But we know there's more to do, and we're committed to building on their progress. So today, I'm proud to announce the release of the National Strategy for Suicide Prevention and Federal Action Plan. This strategy is a result of a joint effort between more than 20 federal agencies, and the Suicide Prevention Resource Center and the Action Alliance. We received input from more than 2,000 experts and people with experience with either suicide loss or suicide-related behaviors to inform this work. And for the first time, the strategy is paired with a federal action plan that includes more than 200 actions the government will take to advance in the next 3 years to prevent suicide. This includes things like implementing the universal suicide risk screening across all Indian health service systems, training frontline workers in the housing sector to detect distress and make appropriate referrals, and launching a new multimedia campaign to promote secure firearm storage within the military. In a few minutes, we will hear from advocates for change and key administration leaders who will help drive this work forward. I also want to thank and really offer my special gratitude to Ashley, Allo, and Shelby for sharing their stories. Finally, we are so grateful for the partnership of everyone in this room to create this strategy and are excited to continue to work together to save more lives. I'm now pleased to introduce a champion and leader addressing some of the critical issues that underlie our mental health crisis. Dr. Vivek Murthy, U.S. Surgeon General, and who is a great leader on these issues and also a great friend. Vivek, thank you for being here and for leading us in this important discussion.
Ashley Eller Shelby, I'm going to have you just come up and join me, and I'm going to introduce you in a second. Why don't you come have a seat? Go ahead, Ashley. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing? It's good to see all of you here today. I'm so happy and just honored to be joined by three people I deeply admire, by Ashley Judd, an advocate and an actress, by Shelby Rowe, who has been leading suicide prevention efforts in communities and helped inform this product, actually, that we announced today, the National Suicide Plan. I also want to welcome Aloe Blacc, who is a songwriter, a musician. We had an argument about whether he's a scientist or not. I think he is one. Certainly trained in, in science. He's invested in scientific ventures that are helping to advance prevention and treatment. These are three incredible individuals in their own rights, but who also come to this conversation with something that many of us in this room come with, which is stories, lived experience, a connection, a personal connection to the topic of today, which is suicide. I'll say when I was coming over to this event, I was thinking about my uncle, who we lost to suicide when I was in high school. I was the first one to learn about his loss, the first one to pick up the phone and speak to his roommate, who told us that he had in fact taken his own life on that day. But at that time, I was a junior in high school. I didn't know who to call. I didn't know how to think about this. I don't know if it was my family's fault because we missed certain signs. I didn't know what to do with the shame that we all felt around the fact that this happened to someone in our family. I didn't know what to do about any of that. And my family was confused, and it was a time of great pain. And I think that many of us who are here today, and who may be listening from afar, also come to this not just as individuals and as advocates, but as people with stories, as people carrying our loved ones on our shoulders, perhaps people we have lost or nearly lost. And that's a heavy weight to carry. It reminds me of this beautiful poem that I once had the privilege of reading at a wedding by E.E. Cummings that starts with the first line that says, "I carry your heart, I carry it in my heart." And that it describes, I think, how so many of us carry the weight of what we've gone through, of what we've seen and witnessed in our own lives, in our families, in our communities. We carry those lives, we carry those stories in our heart. And sometimes that weight can be heavy. But here we're here together for a reason, which is that we don't have to carry that weight alone. And that from a government standpoint, we want to do everything we can to make sure that we are preventing suicide whenever possible and supporting those who may be left behind or who may be survivors. But I also want to just underscore what Ashley and Shelby and Aloe will help us do, which is to recognize that there's great power in sharing our own stories with one another, that we can be sources of strength for each other. And so I want to start this conversation actually by asking each of you to just reflect on the experiences perhaps in your own life that inspired you to join us today. And anything that you're open to sharing, I know that everyone here would love to hear. So Ashley, let me start with you.
Good afternoon, my friend.
Good afternoon.
This is my buddy.
Yeah. We are old buddies, yes.
We've had the opportunity to spend some time together, and it's always good to be in fellowship with the Surgeon General. And it's so nice to meet Aloe and Shelby, and thank you all for being here. I've learned in recovery that I can pretend to care, but I can't pretend to show up. And I'm here because I am my beloved mother's daughter. And on the day she died, which will be the 2-year anniversary in 1 week, the disease of mental illness was lying to her, and with great terror convinced her that it would never get better. But before I talk more about that, I have a firm belief that we deserve to be remembered, not just for how we died, but how we lived. So I want to just say a few words about Naomi Judd. She was born in Appalachia in eastern Kentucky in 1946, the eldest of four, and the daughter of a working-class man who had an Ashland Oil fill-in station. Her mom was a clever, red-headed homemaker who loved that British comedy, those wacky ones. She loved them. And when she was small, she was in a school play, and when the play was over, the curtain came down behind her, and she kept performing to the delight of the parents, and that's when she discovered she really enjoyed holding an audience's attention. She was a survivor of childhood and adult male sexual violence. She became a nurse. She sometimes relied on public assistance. She was the friend of many Nobel Prize winners, and she wrote a song for Dr. Francis Collins called The Big Bang Boogie. She won several Grammys, and she left country music better than she found it. She also lived most of her life with an untreated and undiagnosed mental illness that lied to her and stole from her, and it stole from our family, and she deserved better. I'm also here because I was molested by a man for the first time that I remember when I was 7 years old, and that's when I had onset of childhood depression. And I know the feeling of not wanting to be here, but I had a different experience because I went to treatment in 2006 for unresolved childhood grief and sexual trauma. And I've been in good recovery for 18 years, and I've had a different outcome than my mother. And I carry a message of hope and recovery.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ashley. Shelby, can I come to you?
Yes. Chotma sahochafoet Shelby. Chikasha nompa sahochafoet shlakont fi. Chikasha saya. Hello, my name is Shelby. I am Chickasaw. When I turned 50, some folks in my community that I dearly love gifted me with my Chickasaw name. My Chickasaw name, Shlakont fi, means the one who survived. And with that, I am happy. I could think of no better way to introduce myself to you all today than say, hi, I'm Shelby. I am the one who survived. I am a mother. I am an artist. I am a storyteller. And I'm also a suicide prevention professional and advocate. And I was so honored to have the opportunity to lead our team of professionals. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. In really helping to craft this national strategy and to help bring the voice of lived experience, the voice of equity to every sentence of this document. So that, to be our proud lead, which never would have happened had I not survived. I have PTSD. I also am a survivor of child sexual abuse, survivor of domestic violence, and carry a lot of trauma. And in 2010, that trauma almost took my life because I was in a downward spin and didn't think I would ever come back up out of it. Fortunately, I did. And when I can't live that way anymore, but maybe I can live another way, and any other way looked better than death. So started a new path, staying in suicide prevention, where I had been. And people said, don't tell anyone that you're a suicide attempt survivor, it'll hurt your career. And I'm not really good at listening to people, and I have a big mouth, so I went ahead and started telling people. Once I was okay with it myself, I was okay telling people. And it did not hurt my career. If anything else, people watching going, oh, I could never tell anyone I'm a suicide attempt survivor, it'll hurt my career. I'm here on the stage, gainfully employed, and still a respected leader in the field. So I encourage any of you, open up and be honest when you bring your authentic self to your work and your passion. It makes everything better.
I
Thank
just
you.
want to say, before Alo, you go, that that term gainfully employed is such an understatement in terms of what you have contributed and the impact that you've made, Shelby. So I'm so glad you spoke up, and we're all grateful for your contributions. Thank you. Alo?
Yeah, thank you, Shelby, for sharing, and Ashley as well. And thank you for having me. I'm here because I believe in the tremendous power of music to amplify these important messages. I'm a follower, a disciple of the late, great Harry Belafonte, who was an amazing artist who used his voice for the power of good, in many ways transformed this country in lots of ways that were really unnoticed. And because of that, I show up and stand with the folks that I have been close to, who have inflicted self-harm and fortunately survived, but also the folks who I've been close to, collaborators that I've worked with, who have inflicted self-harm and succumbed to their harm. And I really believe that it's important for all of us to recognize the power that we have. And so, in knowing someone who may be going through a traumatic time and just being a stand for them could make the big difference. And I want to encourage all of us here today and all of us watching to recognize the role that we can play, the positive role we can play in someone else's life. It's not always easy to know what's going on. But I truly believe that community is the answer. And the more that we can be in community and communication, the more we can recognize and see and offer our friends and our family members that moment to say, you know what, I need you. I need your help. And you know, it makes me think about those moments where you get the phone call and a friend of yours has committed self-harm, and you think, when was the last time I called? When was the last time I texted? Who else was around? And I think that there are cultural practices that we may have lost that we can reintroduce along with this platform and plan that we're presenting today that can help us all get back to a place where we're really in community and in connection and in conversation so that we can always be there and know who needs help.
Beautiful. Thank you, Alo. What you said made me think of the word regret. You mentioned when you hear that something's happened to someone you love, and you think, when was the last time I called them? Did I pick up when they called me? Has it been a while since I've gotten back to them? These are all the questions that go through our head, and certainly for me as well. I know all of us have busy jobs and busy lives, but one of the things that you said, Alo, that I want to underscore is that sometimes touching someone else's life and making them feel like they're not alone and they're supported doesn't have to take a lot of time. Sometimes we transact that feeling, sometimes we convey and deliver that love with just a moment or two on the phone where we're calling someone and checking in on them. One thing I'd like to ask each of you to do is, just for a moment, think about somebody in your life who might be struggling right now, somebody who may be having a hard time, maybe they're feeling alone. Somebody who could use a little bit of support. And just raise your hand when you've got somebody in your head that you're thinking about. Okay, nearly all of us. If each of us walked out of this room today with a commitment just to reach out to that person at some point today, maybe it's a text checking in on them, maybe it's a quick phone call to say, hey, I was just thinking of you and wanted to know how you're doing. Maybe it's swinging by to see them in person if they're close to us. You never know when that can make all the difference in the world. There's this asymmetry that science tells us about, the asymmetry between the impact we perceive we have on people and the impact we actually have. We dramatically underestimate how much our presence, our caring about somebody, or just noticing them, how much of a difference that makes in their life. So don't anyone tell you that you're not a healer because you don't have an RN or an MD or a DO after your name. We all have the capacity and the power to help each other heal, and that's what we have to do now more than ever. Alan?
May I make one comment just to double click on what you said? If you do choose to take his advice and reach out to a friend, I would encourage you, one, to offer a moment of joy in that reach out. Hey, I was just thinking about that one time we did this and we laughed and laughed. Because what you're offering them is a positive memory. And if you don't have that, I'm an advocate for music, so offer a song that's going to bring them joy. Just a thought, just a thought. Thank you, Dr. Murray.
And may I suggest some songs by an artist that I happen to know? Aloe, so I'm a huge fan of Aloe's music, and we actually had, on the note of joy, we had a concert that we organized from the Office of the Surgeon General last year in conjunction with the Kennedy Center. It was called our Songs for Hope concert, and it was based on the belief that the arts and music in particular can help us heal. And Aloe was one of our key performers, and not only did he bring joy to the audience in such a profound way, but now whenever I take my kids to school in the mornings, they ask for Aloe's song, so we play it every day on the way to school. And it has brought joy to our whole family, so thank you, and just another endorsement for the power of music. Ashley, speaking of things that we have done together, you and I had the chance to do a podcast together, and it wasn't just me and you. You graciously agreed to come on to our podcast, which is called House Calls, but you also brought 3 wonderful friends with you, your chosen family, and I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to the power of your chosen family in helping you after the painful loss of your mother.
I would love to, and Maria Shriver said, what is a chosen family and how do you get one? So chosen family is, so how do you get one? I met Laura at Zumba at the Y. I met Heather at a mutual friend's funeral over prayer, and I met the others in 12-step recovery. And we are so tightly knit and bonded that they became Mom's chosen family, and everyone called her Mama. We celebrate the holidays together. We vacation in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. We went to see U2 at the Sphere. And the day that Mom died, I sent one text to the group and said, emergency, Williamson County Hospital. And in the time it took them to drop everything and drive to the hospital, they were there. And they walked beside me through that entire experience. And, I just gave them a code word, which they used at the emergency room entrance, and they were just with me the entire time. They coordinated everything, the dishwasher, getting the covers off the patio furniture, and they brought Mom so much joy and pleasure in her later years. Even when she could only come over and lay on the sofa, they were around her. And for my birthday last Friday, we had a Zoom. Pop was with them in Nashville yesterday for another one's birthday, and Logan's parents, she's doing elder care. It's Pop's role to be proud of Logan. She was just accepted out of 250 applicants, only 25, to become a mental health counselor because of Mom. And he's her Pop too, and it's his role to be proud of her. So that's my chosen family.
And I think it's so powerful you share that, because a lot of us may not have birth family around us, but we can build these relationships, and we can be that family for other people too. Like if I could do one thing in terms of nudging our culture, in a slightly different direction, it would be to nudge people to lean forward, lean into other people's lives as opposed to leaning back. I think we often are very thoughtful in wanting to respect people's privacy, but sometimes that well-intended instinct prevents us from inquiring about how people are doing or reaching in when they're struggling, and we think, let's just let them be. They'll ask for help when they need it. But any of us who have been through pain know that we don't always we aren't always able to ask for help when we need it. Sometimes we need people to come into our lives and to offer that help. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Ashley,
it's and the intimacy can be so exquisitely poignant. Like as I mentioned, Logan's doing elder care, and we were all hiking in the Smokies together, and we sat down and said, "Logan, what will you need for us when your dad dies?" So we can be thinking about how we need to show up for you.
Yeah, those are the kind of conversations we ideally want to have with our family, but sometimes we hesitate to. Shelby and Alo, I was wondering in the few minutes that we have remaining, I would love for both of you to speak to what people around us can actually do to help support us, to support others who may be struggling with thoughts of suicide. Sometimes that can be scary for other people when they realize somebody is considering harming themselves or taking their own life. They don't know what to do. But maybe, Shelby, we can start with you. You helped inform so much of the National Strategy on Suicide Prevention that we released today. What advice would you have for people on how they can show up for people who, in their lives, who may be struggling?
So I would say don't worry about, if you're saying the right thing, just say something and show up and share your presence. If a simple sentence could fix their problems, it would have already fixed it. And it's okay to sit and go, this really sucks. I can't fix it, but I'm here for you. What do you need? And then maybe they just need you to sit there. Maybe they need you to do laundry, unload the dishwasher, whatever it is. So I would say, treat them the same you would treat someone who has a life-threatening terminal health condition, because mental health, brain conditions are terminal life-threatening health conditions as well if they do not get treated and managed. So to show up, have patience, because sometimes I think the hard thing is when you're struggling and people have showed up for you, and there's an expectation that you need to get better right away to reward them for showing up for you. And I would say have patience and let them be however they need to be. That will really make a difference and help them recover.
Thank you, Shelby. And Alo, as you just think about it from your perspective as somebody who suffered loss, of somebody you cared deeply about, what did people do for you as somebody who was, in a sense, a survivor who was left behind? What did people do for you that was helpful at that time, or what do you wish they had done?
I have a very unique lens and experience. My collaborator and friend, Tim Bergling, took his life. And the outpouring of love that came from our community of fans was really helpful in helping me get through his passing. The family and friends within our circle were also very, very helpful and supportive. Not everybody has that kind of support. And so, of course, I've got a unique experience. But to answer your earlier question of how can people show up, when a close friend of the family attempted to take their life, we then thought about how can we create a system of check-ins from everyone, this constellation of support to insulate this loved and dear friend, so that we know that somebody within the network is always checking in. And so it's an idea that I feel like maybe hard to duplicate always, because people are busy, and again, there's this fear of, am I checking in too much? Am I bothering this person who is going through this time? And ultimately, I think, as Shelby said, don't worry if you're saying the wrong thing. I think what it comes down to is reaching out and making that connection. And I don't think there's such thing as too much love. Let's give as much as we can.
What a beautiful line. There's no such thing as too much love. I'm going to remember that. And I think it is so appropriate. I think as Maya Angelou reminded of us in her poetry, that people may not remember what you say, but they remember how you made them feel. And For anyone who's worried about, am I going to say the right thing, choose the right words, those words matter less than how you show up. They matter less than the fact that you did show up, like at all. You know, I know our time is coming to a close today, but one of the things I wanted to just underscore about this whole event, about the product that we're putting out today, is that these are meant not only to be concrete strategies and programs and tools that can help us reduce suicides and address prevention, but they're also intended to be sources of hope. And we need hope at a time when many people are struggling, when many families are worried. I take hope in the stories that each of you shared, stories that you shared with authenticity, with courage, but stories I think many of us can relate to because they're just how human you were. I also take hope in the fact that in the last 3 years, I have seen more action from this administration on mental health than I have seen in the entire nearly 30 years that I have been in public health. Actions to expand the mental health workforce, to increase the number of people who can access mental health care, efforts to set up and successfully now set up the 988 crisis text line, efforts to make sure that distance care, also called telemedicine, is something that can be preserved and protected and even expanded so that more people can get access to care. These are just some of the many advances that have been made in the last 3 years, and I take hope in that as well. But finally, I take the greatest hope, perhaps, in the stories I hear from people all around the country, people who have lived through the dark, dark periods in their life that we've spoken about today, whether it's with you yourself experiencing thoughts of suicide or having a loved one who's going through that. But I've seen so many of them turn that pain into a passion for helping others, whether it's being a part of a community organization, whether it's just being more mindful about stepping up to support loved ones in their own life. And we all have the power to bring that hope to one another. As one of my old mentors once reminded me, she said, when you stand in strength, you remind other people that they have strength as well. You give them something to reach for during difficult times. So as we go forward today, let's just remember that as difficult as things may be, that there are many sources of hope and light around us. Some of them in the actions that we are taking in programs, government and non-government, all across this country. Hope that is reflected in the many pages in this National Strategy for Suicide Prevention, but most of all, hope in our stories and in the enduring promise that if we can show up for one another and support one another, then we can provide so much of the healing that each of us desperately need. So.
And Dr. Murthy, just before we end,
Yes.
I would say, for those of you who know someone or maybe yourself are suffering in the darkness, in isolation, and don't feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel, just remember there is light. Your friends and family are light. You yourself are light. And so I want to share this with you, and I hope that you will join me, because I feel like this is the essence of this campaign. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, come on, y'all. I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Just remember, you are the light. Remember, you are the light.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. What a beautiful, beautiful way to end. Thank you once again for using the power of music to bring us home, Alo. Thank you to each of you, Ashley, Shelby, Alo, for everything you shared today, for giving us your time, inspiring us with your stories. And it is now my great pleasure to introduce two other incredible leaders who I've had the great pleasure of working with now for some years now, leaders in our administration in the Department of Health and Human Services. The first is Miriam Delphin-Rittman, who's our Assistant Secretary for Mental Health and Substance Use at HHS, as well as Dr. Deb Howery, who played so many roles at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, but currently serves as a Chief Medical Officer, as a Deputy Director, and has just been a great friend and collaborator. I'm going to turn it over to both of them, but please join me in giving a hand once again to our panelists. Thank you so much.
That was wonderful. And so good afternoon, everyone. It is just a pleasure to be here, and I just want to say Ashley and Alo and Shelby, thank you so much for sharing your stories and for your inspiration and for the hope that you bring us through sharing those stories. And I loved the ending in terms of light and the fact that we are all light and can help each other through challenging times. So thank you for that gift. I also want to say thank you, Surgeon General Murthy, for the kind introduction and just for all the work that you've done around sort of promoting wellness and light and connection and are looking at loneliness and ways to mitigate that. Again, a pleasure to be here with you and Dr. Harry as we announce the release of the 2024 National Strategy for Suicide Prevention and the first ever federal action plan. We know that suicide is a challenging and urgent public health concern. In 2022, we've heard some of these stats already. In 2022 alone, about 13 million adults died by suicide. About 22% also of high school students seriously considered suicide. We know that suicide affects every race, every gender, every ethnic group, every orientation. And sadly, more than 49,000 people died by suicide in 2022. And so addressing suicide prevention is important now more than ever. It's important now more than ever. And so this is the first time in more than a decade that we've come together as a nation to develop a comprehensive approach to tackling this complex and incredibly personal challenge and area of issue. So I'm going to briefly talk broadly about the suicide plan, and then I'm going to pass the floor to Dr. Howery, who will talk a little bit about the federal action plan, so some of the work around implementing the plan itself. So we see the plan very much as a call to action. The numbers that I shared are heartbreaking. These are our family members, our friends, our neighbors, people that we've walked with through our lives. And so this plan is very much about sort of addressing and meeting this challenging moment around addressing suicide. It seeks to prevent suicide in the first place. So working upstream and thinking about sort of preventive efforts to be able to address suicide prevention. It's designed to identify and support people with increased risk through treatment and crisis intervention. You've heard a lot about the 988 work and the crisis work that's happening. And so this plan addresses sort of treatment and crisis intervention. It addresses preventing reattempts, promoting long-term recovery. We know that recovery is real and recovery is possible, and we have living witnesses of this across the country. And it supports survivors of loss as well. The strategy, in terms of its structure, contains 4 different strategic directions, so including community-based suicide prevention. We know community-based strategies and interventions are so important. Treatment and crisis services, surveillance, quality improvement, and research. It's important that we use data to look at what's working, to look at what's not working, to course correct as we need to. And health equity in suicide prevention. It's so critical that we address the disparities that we're seeing in terms of the patterns and trends. And so we're pleased to have created a strategy rooted in data with recommendations from people with lived experience as well. From people with lived experience letting us know what's going to make a difference, what helped them in their journey. And so that is incorporated into this plan as well. The 2024 plan further emphasizes health equity. It emphasizes 988 Suicide Crisis Lifeline and Crisis Care Continuum. We know the full continuum of care is important. Youth and social media, there's content related to that as well, and also substance use disorder and suicide. The 2024 National Strategy for Suicide Prevention, it's about more than just saving lives. It's also about meeting people with compassion, with understanding, with support, walking alongside them, giving them hope, letting them know that recovery is real, recovery is possible. They don't have to struggle alone, they don't have to stand alone. Helping to connect people who are struggling to meaningful supports and services, and to let them know that they need not struggle alone in their loss. And so now it's my pleasure to turn the floor over to Dr. Deb Howery, who will share about the federal action plan. Dr. Harry?
So thank you, Dr. Delphin Rittman. I'm proud to stand alongside colleagues at SAMHSA with whom we have worked so closely to bring the new National Strategy and Action Plan to you today. I'm grateful to the administration and the many federal departments and agencies that have made firm commitments to take action to prevent suicide. Every suicide is tragic, and family and friends are often left wondering why or what caused their loved one to think suicide was their only option. The answers to those questions are complex and can include many different challenges. Like many in the room today, having personally lost a friend to suicide, this issue is one I'm passionate about. Together, we must act to prevent suicide and to promote healthy and resilient communities across the United States. Help is available. The action plan that accompanies this new strategy details how CDC, SAMHSA, and over 20 federal agencies are working together to provide a comprehensive whole-of-government approach. In 2024 alone, agencies have committed to things like expanding suicide risk screening across Indian country, improving 988 data collection, and developing resources to help communities implement strategies to reduce suicide risk in the first place. There is power in our collective action. Working alongside one another, federal partners, states, and communities, and people with lived experience, and those most impacted, we can address the many factors increasing suicide risk and elevate those that promote well-being. Hope is possible. We must also increase public awareness that there are actions everyone can take to help someone who might be struggling or in distress. I invite you to visit our CDC website for more information on suicide prevention. We are dedicated to working with our partner agencies and groups to support this national strategy, and we will continue to be a committed partner in suicide prevention. Thank you. And now I'd like to turn this over and introduce Stephanie Feldman, Assistant to the President and Director of the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Thank you all.
Good afternoon. I know you've had a really meaningful day here, and it's my privilege to close this out, and I'm just going to provide a few brief comments. I am the director of the first ever White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, which President Biden established just a little over 6 months ago. He asked Vice President Harris to oversee this work, and he asked us to address all forms of gun violence. So yes, mass shootings, community violence, suicide by firearm, accidental shootings, domestic violence with firearms, and we absolutely see suicide by firearm as a key part of our work. It is complementary to the work of making sure that people get access to health care that they might need if they're experiencing suicidal ideation. And that's why it's been such a critical part of the agenda that President Biden has put forward since day one of his administration. So I know you all know better than me how important reducing access to lethal means is as part of a strategy to reduce suicide, which is why it's a critical piece of the document being produced today. Just providing a little bit of space, a little bit of time to be able to get someone to help if they're experiencing suicidal ideation can make all of the difference. In the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, in order to help get people to the help they might need when they're experiencing suicidal ideation, we're really focused on two key tools: safe storage of firearms and extreme risk protection orders. So on safe storage of firearms, we're taking action. The VA, the Department of Defense, Health and Human Services, DOJ, the Justice Department are all undertaking awareness campaigns to make sure people understand what lethal means safety is and that there are strategies like safe storage that can reduce suicide by firearm. In May 2022, CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, published a report on firearm safety which highlighted growing disparities in firearm violence, including firearm-related suicide, and emphasized the importance of this lethal means safety. But we're not just stopping at awareness, we're also making sure that we improve access and affordability to safe storage tools. That started early in this administration when the Justice Department made clear that firearm dealers have to sell storage equipment that's compatible with the devices they sell. Makes common sense. If you go to a gun store, buy a gun, you should be able to buy a safe storage tool so a loved one can't access that firearm, it can't get stolen. And then, most recently, we announced a number of new actions to promote safe storage of firearms. The Department of Education, Secretary Cardona, sent a letter to school principals all across the country with a template letter that they could in turn use with their families in their school district to encourage them to have the conversation about safe storage of firearms. We know that educators can be trusted messengers in their communities, and so this administration is working with educators to open up the door to a conversation about safe storage of firearms. In addition, the Department of Justice published the most comprehensive federal resource outlining the different types of safe storage. If you're from a gun-owning family, you probably know this, but if not, there are all sorts of different tools that you can use to safely store firearms. They range from cable locks to a high-tech tool, a biometric tool, and then somewhere in between you also have safes, which are usually a little more expensive but more protective. And the tool from the Department of Justice walks through the benefits of each of those types of tools and when they might make the most sense. So if you have a toddler, it might work to have that cable lock, especially if you can't afford other tools. But if you have a teenager who is experiencing suicidal ideation, a cable lock will not work. And we need to be able to say that, and we need to be able to encourage people to seek more effective tools to reduce access to firearms. And we need to recognize that we need to help some people purchase them when they're too costly, which is why this administration has made funding available through the American Rescue Plan and through the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act for cities to buy safe storage equipment and hand it out to people who might need it. So that's safe storage. The second tool is extreme risk protection orders. These are commonly called red flag laws, so you might have heard it referred to that way. These tools allow certain people in the community, and it varies by state, but sometimes healthcare providers, sometimes family members, sometimes law enforcement, to go to court, so there is due process, and ask the court to determine that someone is a temporary danger to themselves or others, and therefore to temporarily remove that person's access to firearms they might currently have in their possession or might be able to go to a gun store and buy. So it prevents both current possession and future purchases for a temporary basis. I know people whose lives have been saved because of red flag laws. They are a tool that allows family members to make sure that their loved ones in a moment of crisis do not have access to a firearm that allows a brief moment to become deadly. In June 2022, President Biden signed into law the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was the most significant gun safety legislation in nearly 30 years. It included funding for 988, which we've discussed. It also included $750 million for red flag law implementation, because we all know that it's good to have a law, but you need to be able to implement it. And there are already 21 states and the District of Columbia that have these laws in place. Now they're able to use this funding, and we have states all across the country doing this, to educate people about what a red flag law is. When is it appropriate to use? When is it not? And how do you go about using it if you're worried about someone you love? In addition, in March 2024, Vice President Harris announced 2 additional strategies to help implement red flag laws: a new national ERPO, Extreme Risk Protection Order Resource Center, to help states implement these laws. And she's also working directly with states to get more of them to use this funding. Now, President Biden is calling for Congress to enact federal legislation requiring safe storage of firearms. He also wants to create a national red flag law. In the meantime, as I've just discussed, he's doing everything he can without additional authority to make sure that we're promoting these tools. But what I find most hopeful about these tools is that, yes, it would be ideal if Congress acted, but we don't have to wait for Congress to act. We all have a circle of influence that we have where we can encourage the people we love, the people who look up to us, the people who listen to us, encourage them to have conversations about firearm safety so we can get more people to the help they need. And with that, I am so proud to close off a tremendous day, and thank you everyone for being here for this important event. Thanks so much.